most powerful question you've ever been asked?
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking of like powerful coaching sessions I've had. What's the most powerful question I've ever been asked? That's a great question. Well, there's one experience in particular I had when it was in a leadership program. It was Laura Whitworth. She was the leader, and she's one of the people who's instrumental in crafting the ICF, and really fierce. And I had a homework assignment that I was supposed to do, and I didn't do it. And I had a coaching session with her. And she kicked my butt, like really just. And looking back, I don't know. I don't feel regret for it, but I do wish I had prepared something differently. I think I could have got more out of the time had I know why I didn't, and I didn't do the homework assignment. And I'm at peace with that part. The thing that she asked was more like what was around. Okay, so when are you really going to step up and step into this? You know, like what are we waiting for here? Like, and it was one of those moments where I realized, all right, if I'm serious about this, if I gotta, at some point in time, I just got to go do it. And that was really impactful. It was both who it was, the context, all of it. And the crux of it is this play between most people who come to coaching, myself included. They usually have another career beforehand, or there's something else they have going, and they're jumping from that to the next, and there's that leap of faith in between. And yet there's also a yearning, like there's a yearning for more. There's a yearning for a deeper connection, a knowing like, yeah, there's a deeper connection here. I can make this connection, but then there's all of the logistics. Well, how am I going to make money? How am I going to really pivot this career successfully? What if it doesn't work out? Like there's a lot of fear that comes up too. And I was in that's the space I was in essentially. And it was these conversations where I decided, okay, it's time for me to jump full time into this, which was, at the time we had no money. I had a, $10,000 401k I cashed out. I got a lecture from the banker. Like we were just young, in love. We had a 1-year-old. I mean, looking at all of it, like it just is, what are we doing? Like, and then, and this is the spring of 2008, all of these things. So it's, I have compassion for people in that space, but it's also, and I was there too. And I realized in that space, it's such an opportunity to learn about yourself, to learn like that leap, and it's a letting go of good to get to great, and that's so hard. I feel like we're even now as an organization. I feel like something similar. It's all it feels like that decision always looks at every person every day. Yeah, I think that moment stands out.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that in a while. That's cool. What about you? What about for you, Raj?
I've got two that I've never forgotten, really stand out for me. I'm sure there's been plenty of others, but I think these two were the ones that really shifted me, and it was kind of a bit of a shock to the system. So one was direct communication. It was a real prickly question at that time, in the moment. And I was working with my coach, and I was probably whining. I was whining a little bit, or I was in my head, and kind of thinking that people were saying things about me, or they were talking about me. I remember it was in a work role that I was in, and I think it'd come up maybe in a session before, and I remember it was something that I couldn't move from, and I was quite stuck with it. And she just said to me, because she's used direct communication really well, she said, "Raj, what makes you think you are so important?" And I was like, "What? Me? Of course I'm important." But I actually burst out laughing, because it hit me in that moment that I was telling myself these stories. I've never forgotten it. It really actually helps me when I start to tell myself stories, or I get into this space of, maybe people are saying this, because of course they're not. They're too busy thinking about themselves. It just hit me in that moment. And it was very prickly in the way that she did it. So I've never forgotten it. And I remind myself of that if I get into that space. What makes you think you're so important? So that was the first one. And then the next one, John, was in a session with you. And we didn't intend on having the session. We just kind of fell into it. And you asked me this question. It was so moving. And you said to me, what healing still needs to take place? And I asked the other question, and I asked this question. I still journal on it sometimes when things come up, or, in a critic surface, I might not think that I'm good enough. But it was just the way you held that space. It was something about it was so powerful for me in that moment. I'm still getting emotional thinking about it.
Yeah. I think I remember that question too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I think, thank you, Raj. That's lovely. It really is a profession of connection. It's a profession where the coolest thing, I remember getting into coaching and realizing, wow, like we really truly are professional listeners. And yet, for the last, I don't know how many decades, centuries, who knows, human beings have really prized speaking over listening. And yet, here's a profession that says, no, it's listening. Let's do this and see what happens. Yeah, I feel it. The world, there's a beauty in having a profession that feels like you are connecting with other people in an authentic, non-judgmental, curious, open way, that once you experience both sides of it as a coach and a client, I think there's a profundity to it. There's a natural awe that gets generated. But it's striking to me how, when I don't have a coaching session for a couple of weeks, or even I'm like doing admin stuff or working on a website or whatever stuff, like how that falls away. And then I have to get into another coaching session or have my coaching session myself and realize, oh my goodness, this is mind blowing. And then the mind blowing thing happens again, like that range of how quickly I can forget how that works.
That is interesting. And I think, just to add, as someone was saying, what can you do in between coaching sessions? The things that I attempt to do, and I've done for years now, is practice just listening in any relationship. So not to be in coach mode and start throwing, I'm sure people don't want me to be a coach all the time. Just listening to people. Before I trained to be a coach, I would be talking a lot. I used to talk a lot, sometimes aimlessly, about things. And now just holding that space and listening. And sometimes in my mind, I am curious. You catch things. You can't help it when you've been listening for a long time and observing. Yet I also know it's not my role in that space. I'm not that person's coach. I am just there to listen. But that really helped me heighten my listening in coaching as well. Just listening to people, friendships, my husband, my sister, everywhere.
Yeah,
Sit
I
on your
can't help but
hands.
hear things. After a certain point in time, you can't help but hear it. Like you just hear it. Like you can't not hear things. Like if you've coached, if I think, you know, I don't know when or like what time, but it just felt like, yeah, like uh, it's that empathetic listening after a while, I think is actually easier than what we call other listening, selfish listening, self listening. Um, yeah, I mean, empathetic listening is, it's a thing. You get used to it.